previously, Dr. Chen actually was the CSO at the CACA Pharmaceuticals. In there, she actually helped to attract more than 200 million investment. It's really amazing. And the Korea CACA, Dr. Chen helped to start the Transform Pharmaceuticals, which was then acquired by Johnson & Johnson in 2005. And before the Transform, Dr. Chen held various positions in AstraZeneca and Merck. In her career, actually Dr. Chen got a lot of honors and include Fellow of American Institute of Medicine and Biological Engineering. She is also a fellow of the Controlled Release Society. Thanks, Dr. Chen, and let's welcome her to give us a talk.
Thank you for being here and attending this workshop, and also for the invitation to be here. Honestly, when I first got the invitation, I wasn't really sure, what to talk about, because just as the previous two presenters mentioned, career choice and career path is a very personal thing. It really depends on many things, including your personal passion, whether you're in a startup, as Andrea mentioned, or academia, as the last speaker mentioned. You kind of need to know who you are, and also, of course, your own personal life choices and what really a side career is important to you. So there's many complex factors, and honestly, it's really hard to me anyway, very hard to really teach about career development. So I thought maybe what I'll do is just share a little bit of my own journey and looking back on what I might have learned along the way, and hopefully that might be helpful to some of you, especially if you're starting off or you're maybe mid-career looking for different directions. So it's going to be different from the previous two speakers, which are much more, I think, actual tips and learning, but more about sharing about what I have done at different stage of my career. So the key thing I think is, and I tell my kids as well, life and your career is not a straight line. As you'll be able to see from my story, I've changed pathways several times. I actually started college in Shanghai in 1988. My first major was in polymer science. Really, it was because I was interested in chemistry all along in high school, and polymer science was just an emerging field in the late 80s in China. So, no grandiose reasons or necessarily a big plan for career at the time, because I was, 17, so what did I know? But a couple years later, I did have a chance to transfer to the University of Texas in Austin. That actually was into chemistry. And again, it wasn't necessarily a choice per se, but because UT Austin just didn't have a polymer science department standing alone away from chemistry. So of course by default I became a chemist. Interesting enough, my first turn in journey, if you will, is the very first semester I was there. The department or the university requires as a chemist graduation requirement you have to take engineering courses, and one of the engineering courses is chemical engineering, introduction to chemical engineering. I actually had no idea what chemical engineering was at the time, but to fulfill the graduation requirement I had to take one, so I ended up taking the course. And the professor who taught the course, Dr. Bill Corus, really to this day I count him as one of my first mentor, because through that course it was really interesting. I sort of grasped the concept very quickly. I had a lot of conversations with him after class, just problem sets and everything else. So he actually looked at me and said, "Why you're not a chemical engineer, why you're a chemist?" I'm like, well, I never even thought about chemical engineer. And at the time, transferring from chemistry to chemical engineering meant I had to take probably 2 full semester more courses that I was missing. You know, standing today, it probably didn't seem like a difficult choice, but back then it was. I didn't get any financial support or anything from the university. I had to work basically, to pay for my own tuition. Being an international student at the time, tuition was very, very high. So I just said, no, Dr. Morris, I don't know I can afford to do this change. So I think, again, being a just great mentor to me, he first of all encouraged me because he saw the potential in me, but more importantly, he gave me real support and advice. He actually hired me as an undergraduate researcher in his lab, which then at the time qualified me for in-state tuition and gave me a stipend. So financially that was a huge help, but more importantly, he actually opened up his research lab to me and be able to be an undergrad and shadow the graduate student and himself to really understand, or at least to get a glimpse of what research meant and how to form a hypothesis and do experiments, etc. So that sort of was my pivot point, number one, and went from polymer science and chemist and now to chemical engineer. And after that, of course, I gained a lot of interest in doing research. I was able to enter a graduate program at MIT and continue my journey in chemical engineer. But there, again, through my thesis advisor, Dr. Bob Berger, became actually a biomedical engineering stat, because my thesis was much more about applying chemical engineering to solving biomedical problems. And those of you who may or may not know Bob is obviously a luminary in the biomedical research field, and he's also a very successful entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur in Boston area anyway. He's probably co-founded, 20, 30 or more startup company. So there, not only I learned from him, obviously how to do research, how to solve practical problems, but also kind of witnessed firsthand how, potentially doing startups and translating research into practical solutions is a really thrilling journey. And again, back to your earlier talk, it's really that inspired me. I think it's part of me. I didn't know that, potentially that entrepreneurial track is very attractive to me. But, again, I was young at the time. I graduated from MIT. I had no idea, really what I wanted to do. So I chose to go to Big Pharma first, and really spent the first several years of my career actually at a large company, American Astra. I did learn a lot. That's a great thing, that being in Big Pharma. But at least for me, I felt, rapidly a little bit constrained. At least the roles I was in is a bit more defined, and there's lots of structural, definition of who's doing what. So it's a little bit hard to, at least from my own background in Bob's lab, to exert, more influences or be able to do things that are at a larger scale. So after that, part of during that career, of course, I was also always staying in touch with Bob as a mentor. So in 2000, I decided to leave Big Pharma behind and started my own entrepreneurial path. And I guess to this day, it's been 3 startups, and very first one was Transform Pharmaceuticals, got started there. Actually, Bob was co-founder, so that's how I was fortunate enough to get involved. And that one was successfully sold to J&J. And then there also, I met my third mentor, which is instrumental in terms of my career growth. I was actually in a traditional line functional job. So I was in a formulation group, and I was the director of formulation development at the time. Dr. Colin Gardner, who's CSO at Transform at the time, really kind of nudged me to leave the traditional career track behind, to encourage me to go to a matrix role. For those of you who know industry, typically you have departments and that's a line function. But then the matrix role is a little bit less defined in the sense that you typically don't have your own group necessarily, but you lead a program or a project. So it was, again, at the time, not necessarily an easy decision for me either, because it felt very familiar and known to stay in a line function role, because you just climb the career ladder and everything's very defined. And a matrix role, when you wouldn't have, direct report, you don't have actually a true resource to deploy, and all of your leadership would need to be done through influencing and leveraging team members and who are from different functions. So it feels less in control, if you will. But I'm looking back, I think it's a fantastic thing that he encouraged me to do, because of that, I got exposed to a very wide variety of disciplines and learned a lot, because program leader, project leader, I didn't have to only know CMC at that point. You really got to know discovery to preclinical to clinical development, analytical, but also to regulatory, right? To talks to other functions such as what Andrew mentioned, PD and finance, and to build a business and sales, marketing of your product and IP. So because it's sort of like that road change, it opened my eyes wide open, and really, in some ways, they put them in a very different platform. So after Transform, when I was had an opportunity to help start CACA Pharmaceuticals in 2010, I basically at that moment jumped into a very different tier, right? I became a senior executive, a CSO at CACA, primarily because of my very broad exposure and to Transform. At that point, I no longer just a technical expert on one area. I knew enough to run programs, I knew enough to run business, and I could go and sell product if I needed to, and I could, converse with patent, lawyers to talk about patentability and FTO and all that stuff. If I just stayed in a line function, I may not have the opportunity to learn. And of course, CACA, luckily we were very successful as well. We took 2 programs from beginning the sort of bench discovery all the way to approval to commercialization. We also IPO'd the company, so in 2017, and through that process learned a lot about filing S1 and be able to go roadshow and all that stuff. So it's really fun, right? If you think about a different stage of my career, different stage of the company, and grow with small companies from the beginning. And so currently I'm at Metis, and I'm a co-founder now at Metis, and it's a company we utilizing AI and computational tools for better drug delivery and drug development. So we're currently actually fortunate enough to have close to $800 million market cap now, and I'm a co-founder and board member. So I guess looking back, if I could share some of the things I have learned, which may or may not be, but hopefully helpful to some of you, is it's okay to navigate your career not in a straight line, because I personally have made different turns and different choices along the way, changed majors multiple times and changed large company to small company, and just like previous presenter, from industry to go to academia. That is all okay. Embrace opportunity, embrace challenges, because opportunity comes a lot of time. It does come with challenges. And challenges are things that you learn from, right? It's a growth platform. So Dr. Bill Corus, who again my undergraduate mentor, taught me something that I still tell myself and I tell my kids these days. And he used to say, if something doesn't kill you, it is good for you. So that meant when the challenge is there, yeah, it seems like daunting at that point, but if you can embrace it, most likely you actually learn more from that challenge than just smooth sailing and the same thing over and over again. Find mentors. I just personally was so fortunate to have many more, but these are the 3 key mentors in different stages of my life. Of course, who obviously I wouldn't be a chemical engineer if it weren't for him, who not only nudged me toward that direction, but practically provided help so that I could do it. Bob, who to this day is my, go-to person when I have problems or, challenges and just want to have a chat, great presence in my life and great personality. And Dr. Colin Gardner, who again sort of gave me that, really pushed me to some extent to become that broader leader, and therefore became that catalyst so that I can be an executive rather than just a one function manager. And I did seek opportunity to learn not only on the job that I mentioned, work with different discipline, different function. I was always curious about things like business, so on my own time, I actually, when I was younger, taking evening courses at Harvard Business School. They have an extension school, you can just take courses. I sort of learned a lot about financing, business, budgeting, things that, again, to this day, the daily job of running a company is, tremendously important. Also take a lot of sort of more relevant job-related training courses through, ECS and other venues that offer trainings, such as, in various different disciplines like, stats, clinical, talks, ADME, IP even. So again, any of you are in that career, I would say just encourage yourself to, any opportunity, learn, soak up that knowledge, because it'll come back one day and be tremendously useful, just like collecting tools in your tool chest, and it will help you at some point in your career. So I think that's all I'm going to share. So I know it's different from the previous two speakers, but I'm hoping to maybe use that as a conversation starter if there are questions, and feel free to ask. Yeah, go. Oh, you first. Yeah.
And thank you for the great talk. You mentioned finding mentors. I wanted to ask for your suggestion, like how would you go about finding a mentor if they're not like necessarily your PI, or what would be your suggestion?
Great question. I mean, obviously, all three of those would happen to be my either professors that I was working with. But even to this day, like at least in the company setting, academia, I'm less familiar. But you can, I always find that people who are influential are helpful. People, really that they have great experience to share, but they're also influential. So approach them. Any opportunity that you have in a company anyway. For example, when I was in CMC, I had a clinical, which really a different discipline, but either through project or through other interaction, I just go to him, like say, hey, can we have, one-on-ones, and sort of mentorship is in some ways not necessarily like one day you declare that you're a mentor. It's much more that you get to know each other and you seek advice, and I find most people are very open to provide context, either an advice. It could be in a context a program or problem, specific problem first, right? You go to them with good advice, but over time, if that personal rapport is there, then you start to be able to have more conversation above and beyond just the work at hand. So I think mentorship, in many ways, is building a relationship. But first of all, I think identify someone you can really learn from. In many ways, they're perhaps more established and influential, but they probably generally have a reputation also that they're really caring and they want to help, right? So if those two criteria are there, then it's up to us to find an opportunity to interact as much as we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that this is one of the most inspiring story, and the roller coaster of up and down, and changing different courses from chemistry to chemistry is really an excellent, genuine, and unpretentious success story. So that's the thing. I'd like to ask you a specific question about your new venture, the Metis one. I mean, obviously AI is such a big bandwagon, right? People said a lot of things, right? So you said AI and discovery, which makes sense, and drug delivery makes sense. Maybe in clinical trial fixing also makes sense. So I want to ask you, can you give me more specific comment that you can disclose, and what angle are you looking at discovery? Are you looking for a drug to bind to the protein? I mean, what is your angle? Or
right. Okay. So it's not meant to be a Metis
Yeah.
intro, but we actually the Metis is primarily drug delivery.
Oh, delivery.
Discovery angle comes in because we're focusing around mRNA delivery with LNP. So, because if you're familiar with them, there are actually two pieces where we're applying AI computationally. One is mRNA sequence optimization. So, above and beyond typical modification nowadays is known, but there are ways to really do computationally further optimize mRNA sequence, not only just for stability, but also we're aiming for now more tissue-specific expression. So if you imagine our cells are actually different organs have different functions in many ways because our body comes with specific gene regulation, expression regulation mechanism in cells, right? So perhaps even the same type of cell in liver might do different things in the lung, for example. So understanding that and how to build in the regulator into the mRNA sequence could be one potential way, right? So AI is a great tool to be able to harness those information. So that's one aspect, and the second aspect is the LNP, the delivery vehicle optimization. LNP is actually a complex mixture of 4 to 5 different components, and each lipid, could actually be independently optimized, and optimization space is huge if you do pure, experimental studies. So there we utilize a lot of AI, language learning and all that to be able to design one, novel lipids that are outside the very crowded IP space, and second, to get to the most optimal delivery very quickly. So that's sort of what we do. So yes, it has a discovery component, but not the small molecule drug typically, binding to pocket type of idea. Yeah.
Okay. So it's very specific.
For mRNA and LNP, yeah.
Questions?
Any other questions?
Okay, I do have one question. So, in your career, you actually changed from line manager to the matrix manager position. It seems to me that's a huge change.
It's very difficult, I guess.
So, yeah, what's the success characteristic you used to make your success in that change?
It's interesting, because, again, at that stage of my career, like most folks, line function is a very natural, comfortable thing. Because I was director, next step senior director, that's the typical career ladder. We didn't even have a career ladder for like a project leader, right? Yet we had a program at that point in the company, highest priority that needs to go in the clinic, and you just need someone to help to drive it. And so Colin at the time, I think he I never asked him the question like, why me, not someone else, but I think he probably saw that in that role, you need to have enough scientific insight to know, obviously, the CMC part, but someone who has the intellectual curiosity, perhaps, to be able to extend and learn quickly on all the other adjacent field. But there is a little bit of that leadership, perhaps, not just running a group, but more sticking timeline to be able to, but not, in that role, you have to be able to lead by influence, right? So you have to be able to work with each of the functional groups leader to get the resource you need, and to be able to communicate with appropriately, and if problem comes up, how do you proactively, address those? So maybe there's some of that soft skill that he saw in me. I mean, I didn't, at the time it was a struggle, because I actually thought about it long and hard, whether I want to do that or not, and I had multiple conversations with him, but I'm glad he really convinced me to do it, because, it was not certain, it feels like very nervous, nerve-wracking, That's an unknown versus this is known. And I could do known very, very well. Like why did I, take that, but it's just like looking back, I think it's the biggest growth catalyst, I think. So, I mean, and then not everyone has to do it, but the underlying thing is probably true, the theme is true, is even if you stay in a life function, learning about the other discipline is really, really important, right? If you think about growing, at least in industry, from junior level to mid-level manager, and a lot of folks maybe kind of stop there, because it's like an hourglass, maybe the bulk of the folks just end their career there. To then break through to go to senior executive or founder of the company, that's where you now need to know the entirety of the business, right? It isn't just that one slide where you know. So I think wherever you are in your career, if you're in that space, getting to know as much as you can in the broadest way, right? Position you, at least, to have the knowledge to go to the next tier. So
Yeah, that's good.
yeah. Any other
I'm just saying that just to add with this, like big pharma, if you go in big pharma, you get just embedded in the so many functions, right? But it's like if you go to big pharma, small pharma, you have better chance to go better, faster than and get more opportunity than big pharma because big pharma is very structured. They don't budge on that structures.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like you have to choose big pharma or small pharma, depends on you.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you so much for sharing